So we're revisiting our rods and mains on our used engine that we're going to put in the Z06 that's going through a compression increase and also going to get a hot cam. I'm a paranoid mechanic, you know. I only see things when they fail. When things are running right and good and they stay running, they don't come back to me. I see them when they fail. And so to have something with such high mileage before we start and then to ramp up the power just makes me nervous. So what I've done is I've taken all of the main bolts and studded bolts out of the LS7 that came apart, and I took all of the main bolts and studded bolts out of this motor, and I measured them all, and I took 10 of the shortest from both sets. Here are my measurements. I marked the shortest lengths that I took, and those are the ones that I reinstalled on this motor. So the bolts that are in here are the shortest out of both of these motors and have stretched the least, just to guarantee that I got the best clamping force that I can have. Again, while this is a used motor, the crankshaft is a brand new LS3 long snout crank that is getting harder and harder to find. And even if this motor comes apart, to have this crankshaft means that we can keep the dry sump oiling system and throw it in the next motor. It's got fresh bearings on it, and I'm really worried about the bolts stretching too much and having yielded too much. So, like I'm saying, I took all of the bolts out of the LS7, measured everything, and I got 2 whole sets of bolts. These are the longer ones that stretch the most. For the rod bearings, bearing caps, I've just got a set of, because the LS7 uses longer rod, they use a different rod bolt than any other LS engine. So I got a set of ARP 134 6006 rod bolts. These bolts are nice, you just torque them down. They give you a method for if you have a stretch gauge, then you can stretch them to, you can stretch the bolts to 0.0055 to 0.0060. I don't have a stretch gauge, so it gives you nice little torque specs. It says if you don't have a stretch gauge, you just torque them down to 40 foot-pounds and call it a day. And that's what we're doing. So right now we're on, we've already done the first 2, we're on cylinder 3. We're changing 1 bolt at a time. The bolts are held in with a little wire, or a little clip, a little sleeve if you will. So I'm using the long needle nose pliers just to keep some upwards pressure on it while I keep spinning it, and it comes right out. I'll show you that sleeve. Here's that sleeve, right here. The ARP bolt gets a little bit of the moly lube right on it. Remember, when we're setting up the ARP bolts, it's really important that we only put the lube on the thread of the bolt, and that we don't get any of the lube up on the head of the bolt. The head of the bolt is the friction that sets the torque where it needs to be. If we lube the head of the bolt and we have lubrication on the head of the bolt or oil on the cap where the bolt goes, this can let you overstretch the bolt and skew your reading past the point where it wants to be. So we only put the lube on the threads, and then we wipe it so that nothing will squish out onto the surface where the head of the bolt's going to ride, so it gets a nice, good, accurate torque reading. And the first bolt on any cap, I won't torque down all the way. I'll just torque it a little ways to seat it, and then I'll get the other one apart and get the other one started. Go. And these are not ARP 2000 rod bolts, these are just the 8740. I'm so worried that under the increased compression or under the increased power, the bolt's going to stretch a little bit. It's going to relax the pressure on the bearing, maybe let the bearing spin or something, which probably wouldn't happen. I'm just being paranoid. Okay, now we'll torque this one down. We're going to 40. Go to 40. Double check them. And now we go on to cylinder 4. Bolt out. Wipe the cap down. Put it in. And then we'll roll the motor to the next pair. Lift up. Because remember, we're not just going to build this and let it go. I got to tune it. So we really want this to make its way through a tuning session without coming apart. But also, I proudly stand by everything I touch for a year. And while this is a used engine, like if anything goes sideways, I'm going to be as good as I can be to my customer. So I need to do everything in my powers to keep this from coming apart for a year. Wipe the cap down. Fastener in, screw it down. 40. 40. Now we'll roll the motor around to the last set of caps. Perfect. Bolt out. Wipe off the cap. Bolt with lube. Goes in the hole. And there we go. Roll the motor a little bit, make sure everything's still nice and smooth, which it is. Beautiful. And now we can feel good about putting on our windage tray and buttoning up the bottom end.